Each year in January, many people make resolutions to improve some area of their life. No doubt many of them quickly fail and no lasting change ever occurs. Commitments and excuses for not keeping them are all part of life. Marriage, family, work. Life asks a lot of us. Church can fall into that category too. Spiritual commitments are part of life as well. We're beginning a brand new series today that we're calling Staying Power. I'll give you the bottom line for today and really for the whole series. It's that we grow spiritually by the commitments we make and keep. This is a series about how to grow in your faith and as a follower of Jesus Christ and the commitments we want to help you to make to do that. But you might be thinking, I'm already committed. In fact, I'm overcommitted. Why would I want to add any more commitments in my life? Why does spiritual growth matter anyway? I believe in God. I go to church most of the time. I pray when I think of it. I'm basically a good person. Spiritual growth empowers us to identify our purpose and to accomplish what God has created us to do. Spiritual growth encourages us to love the people around us the way we want to, but often fail. Spiritual growth allows us to love and care for ourselves in a way that is healthy and helpful. In fact, our most important objective in life could be to grow spiritually. It can actually be more important than your job, your career, your relationships, your friendships, your marriage, or your kids, because it can determine success. It can assure your success with all those other areas in your life. That's why we should be open to and interested in spiritual growth. But being open to growth is not enough. There's a second part. And the second part is the crucial part. Anyone can be open to growth. To actually grow, you've got to make a commitment and keep it. That's why we're calling this series Staying Power. Staying power is absolutely necessary for spiritual growth because there's obstacles to growing spiritually. Everything in the world feels more important or more urgent, more real than your spiritual life. And the rest of the world doesn't really support, much less encourage, your spiritual growth. Every day we're inundated with information and encouragement to lose weight, to get in shape, to buy that new car, or finally take that vacation. Nobody is encouraging us to grow spiritually. Besides, it takes time. In the same way that you cannot accomplish anything worthwhile quickly, that there is no microwaving or air frying your spiritual maturity. Once again today, we're looking at a parable that Jesus used to describe the kingdom of heaven, which is always a reference to Christ's rule on earth. In this case, Jesus is telling this parable to the religious leaders who are opposing him. We heard him say, Jesus again in reply spoke to the chief priests and the elders of the people in the parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son." Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a big party, a banquet given for a famous person. This is an image that Jesus uses over and over again. Often we don't want to commit to spiritual exercises because they may seem a little down or depressing, been experienced as boring or bad. This was never how Jesus described life with God. Instead, he chose to compare the spiritual life to a party. And when we talk about spiritual growth, it is about learning to identify and enjoy the good things God has in store for us right now, about developing the right character to recognize and to receive God's gifts. Like in our own culture, weddings were a big deal, a very big deal, and even longer and somewhat more elaborate, at least in some ways, than our weddings. Then, as now, people usually made them a priority and were willing to travel and spend lots of money to attend one when invited. A wedding feast thrown by a king would have been the grandest kind of an affair in a community. Everyone would want to be included. So when Jesus sets up this story, the image is of a dazzling and irresistible opportunity, one that anyone would do anything to be a part of. But that's not what happened. He dispatched his servants to summon the invited guests to the feast, but they refused to come. It's important to recognize when looking at parables just how unlikely are the scenarios that they often describe. They're so unlikely that those listening to this parable have even laughed out loud that it was so incredulous. Anyway, the king refuses to take no for an answer. A second time, he sent other servants saying, "Tell those invited, behold, I have prepared my banquet. My calves and fattened cattle are killed and everything is ready. Come to the feast." It's going to be surf and turf, a pasta bar, sushi stations, top shelf liquor, an amazing location, all A-list, guest list, the party of the season, that you don't want to miss this. But some ignored the invitation and went away. One to his farm, another to his business. The rest laid hold of his servants, mistreated, and killed them. This is an absurd story, but it's an allegory, a story in which all the characters and details represent something else. In this case, Jesus is summing up the history of Israel and how they had repeatedly ignored God's invitation and mistreated the prophets. The story continues. A king, undeterred with this ingratitude and hostility, perseveres in his desire to throw a great party for his son and fill his party with guests. The feast is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy to come. Go out, therefore, into the main roads and invite to the feast whomever you find. The servants went out into the streets and gathered all they found, bad and good alike, and the hall was filled with guests. Those invited were not worthy to come because they ignored and rejected the invitation. They made themselves unworthy by their indifference and hostility to the invitation. In order to fill the feast, the servants go out and invite anyone that they can find. So the good news is that the party is finally filled. But then there's that final twist to the story. But when the king came to meet the guests, he saw a man there not dressed in a wedding garment. He said to them, "My friend, how is it that you came in here without a wedding garment?" The implication here is that the king not only provided the feast for his guests, but he would have also provided the wedding clothes, like party favors. And this would have been necessary for the guests at this banquet since they were brought in directly from the streets. Evidently, this one particular guest refused to put on the new garment. So the parable ends sadly. Then the king said to his attendants, "Bind his hands and feet and cast him into the darkness outside, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth." Maybe you'd say he's disinvited to the party because the king didn't like the way he was dressed. Not necessarily. Because he refused to put in any effort whatsoever to participate in the feast. He refused to commit to the party in even the simplest way possible, by simply changing his clothes. He came as a consumer without commitment. And without any commitment, he doesn't really belong at the banquet. You can come to the party as a consumer. You just can't stay that way. God invites us to be a part of his kingdom on earth and a part of what he is already doing. And he will provide the grace we need to accept the invitation and grow spiritually. At St. Peter, we want to help you do everything you can to live as a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to take a look at the commitments that are vital for spiritual growth. Those commitments are serving, tithing, engaging in a small group, practicing prayer and sacraments, and sharing your faith. They spell out the word steps. These are commitments we want to help you to make and keep in order to grow as a disciple. And we're going to be talking more about each of these steps over the course of this series, but not all at once. It's a step-by-step process. It happens in no particular order. But really, the only step that we're asking you to take today is to commit to this series. Commit to the series, that if you're not going to be here in the upcoming weeks, or if you're traveling soon, make sure to join us online. That we're all invited to the party. You can come as you are. You're just not supposed to stay that way.